In the desolate expanse of the frontier sector, nestled on the rust-tinged plains of a planet aptly named Dust Devil, lay outpost Rust Bucket. It wasn't much to look at, a haphazard collection of prefabricated modules, salvaged shuttle hulls, and patched-up habitat domes, all bolted, welded, and taped together with a defiant, ramshackle charm. Dust Devil was a harsh world, prone to searing sandstorms and blistering solar flares, and the outpost itself was a testament to human stubbornness, a testament to making do with what you had. Its life support systems hummed a weary tune, and its energy shields, salvaged from decommissioned mining vessels, were minimal at best, just enough to keep the worst of the dust out, certainly not designed for war. The people of Rust Bucket weren't soldiers. They were a motley crew of independent miners, displaced refugees, and hardy colonists who had come to this remote corner of the galaxy, seeking nothing more than a quiet life and a chance to carve out their own existence. They were accustomed to hardship, to resourcefulness, and to relying on each other. Their community wasn't built on grand design, but on shared grit, and a mutual understanding that a little ingenuity went a long way. At the heart of this resilient community was Old Man Tiber. He was a figure of local legend, a retired orbital architect who had once designed sprawling space stations, now content to spend his twilight years tinkering in his cluttered workshop. Tiber was a curmudgeonly old sort, with a perpetual scowl etched into his weathered face and a pipe almost permanently clenched between his teeth. He complained about everything: the dust, the lack of decent coffee, the youth's reliance on fancy blinky screens. But beneath the gruff exterior beat a heart of pure gold, and a mind that saw potential where others saw only refuse. His workshop was a chaotic mountain of twisted girders, sparking wires, and unidentifiable components, yet Tiber knew exactly where every single piece of junk resided. He often muttered his favorite mantra: "There's no such thing as junk, only parts in waiting." Tiber also had a particularly peculiar habit: he only drank NutriBrew Original Earthblend coffee. If he didn't get his morning mug, the entire outpost knew about it. "This swill," he'd bellow, holding up a cup of standard-issue Outpost Synth Brew, "tastes like recycled boot polish." How am I supposed to think big thoughts on recycled boot polish? Working alongside Tiber, though often at odds with his analog methods, was Kiko. Kiko was a young, sharp-witted tech whiz, barely out of her advanced robotics academy. Her mind raced at quantum speeds, running complex simulations and debugging cutting-edge software with effortless grace. She wore sleek, form-fitting comms gear and preferred holographic interfaces to physical buttons. Kiko initially viewed Old Man Tiber's workshop as a pre-industrial archaeological dig, and his methods as statistically inefficient. She respected his experience but couldn't fathom why he'd bother with physical scrap when elegant algorithms could solve any problem. Their conversations often went something like this: "Tiber, my simulations show optimal resource allocation requires a molecular deconstruction of this durasteel girder for nanite repurposing. HMPH, nanites. This durasteel girder, Kiko, is going to be a load-bearing beam. Nanites ain't gonna stop a rock from hitting your head." Completing their unlikely trio was Buster, the outpost's primary scavenger. Buster was a man of few words, his massive frame a testament to years of wrestling heavy salvage. He communicated mostly in grunts and gestures, but he had an uncanny knack for sniffing out the most valuable, or sometimes the most bewilderingly useless, pieces of scrap across the Dust Devil plains. He'd often return with some truly bizarre finds, a twisted relic from an ancient forgotten vessel, or a massive rusted pipe, leaving Old Man Tiber's eyes twinkling with possibilities. Life on Rust Bucket, though challenging, had a steady rhythm, until now. Far out in the inky black, a new kind of threat was approaching. They were known across several star systems as the Regulators. This was no ragtag fleet. They were a formidable, chillingly efficient alien force, obsessed with universal order and efficiency. Their ships were sleek, obsidian-black constructs, moving with silent, terrifying precision. They didn't invade, they purified. Any planet or settlement that was deemed unregulated, inefficient, or anomalous, was simply erased from the galactic map. Their weapons were highly advanced plasma cannons and precise kinetic accelerators, designed not just to destroy, but to meticulously deconstruct, capable of piercing even advanced energy shields with terrifying ease. The commander of this particular regulator fleet was Commander Vex. Vex was a being of pure, unyielding logic, his crystalline eyes betraying no emotion, only analytical precision. He considered all organics inherently inefficient, and unorganized human settlements like Rustbucket were, to him, nothing more than unregulated waste that needed purification. He viewed humanity as a particularly annoying, noisy pest. His reports to Central Command would simply read, "Target acquired. Primitive organic settlement, 734 Alpha. Status, unregulated. Action, liquidation." He often chuckled, or rather emitted a series of precisely calibrated condescending clicks, at the thought of humanity's primitive tactics. They build with unrefined materials, he'd observed in one data log. They communicate with noise, and they breed with unquantifiable abandon. Such a mess. Rustbucket's limited, antiquated long-range sensors detected the regulator fleet far too late. A single ominous blip appeared on Kiko's salvaged console, then another, and another, until the screen was filled with a terrifying swarm of crimson dots, moving with terrifying speed towards Dust Devil. Initial panic rippled through the outpost. Settlers scrambled, their faces etched with fear. Old Man Tiber's pipe almost fell from his mouth. Kiko, despite her usual calm, felt a cold dread creeping into her veins. "Commander Tiber," she stammered, using his old military title in her panic. "The regulators. They're on an intercept course. Estimated arrival, less than 3 hours." The harsh reality slammed into them. Outpost Rustbucket had no chance. Their few, ancient laser turrets, designed for repelling local wildlife, would barely scratch the paint of a regulator destroyer. Their flimsy energy shields, designed for dust storms, would evaporate under the first concentrated blast of regulator plasma. Kiko frantically ran simulations on her tablet, her fingers flying across the holographic display. Each calculation ended with the same grim prediction, flashing across the screen in stark, undeniable red. Probability of survival, 0.0001%, effectively zero. Outpost annihilation, 99.99999%. Her tablet, usually so precise, then flashed a new bewildered message. Human logic, incompatible. Recalculating, error. Despair, thick and suffocating like the Dust Devil's omnipresent sand, began to settle over the outpost. The settlers gathered in the main communal dome, a low hum of anxious murmurs filling the air. Their simple lives, built on hard work and salvaged dreams, were about to be erased by an alien force that valued only cold, sterile order. The idea of fighting back seemed utterly futile. What could a pile of patched-together habitats do against a fleet designed to purify entire star systems? Their high-tech weapons, the very symbol of regulator efficiency, would tear through Rustbucket like paper. The only thing they possessed in abundance was scrap, and who ever heard of a shield made of junk? The main communal dome, usually filled with the comforting sounds of daily life, was thick with despair. Kiko, her face grim, projected her latest simulation results onto a salvaged projector screen, a stark red overlay showing the regulator fleet's precise trajectory intersecting with Rustbucket's coordinates, culminating in a violent, unavoidable explosion. "Every defensive measure we have, it's just not enough," she stated, her voice hollow. "Their plasma weapons will atomize our shields, and their kinetic rounds will punch straight through our habitats. We'll be lucky if anything larger than a dust mote remains." Her tablet, lying on the table, continued to flash its bewildered error. "Human logic, incompatible. Recalculating, error." A heavy silence followed, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic hum of the outpost's strained life support. Faces were drawn, eyes downcast. Even the most optimistic settlers had lost their spark. Suddenly, a raspy voice cut through the gloom. "Energy shields? Ha!" All heads turned to Old Man Tiber. He was leaning back in his rickety chair, puffing slowly on his pipe, a wisp of acrid smoke curling around his grizzled face. "Fancy energy shields. Too complicated. Too fragile. You see what happens when your advanced tech meets something stronger than it? It breaks." He squinted through the smoke, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. "We ain't gonna fight their tech with more tech. We're gonna fight it with ourselves." Kiko scoffed, crossing her arms. "Tiber, what are you talking about? Are we supposed to throw rocks at them? My simulations show that even a direct hit from a full-grown dust devil slug would barely register on a regulator ship." Tiber took another long puff. "Rocks? No. But a pile of good, honest junk? That's another story. We build a kinetic shield wall." A ripple of bewildered murmurs went through the dome. A kinetic shield wall? Made of what? Laughter, tinged with hysteria, broke out in a few corners. It was an idea so utterly absurd, so hilariously primitive in the face of quantum weaponry, that it almost seemed like a bad joke. "A wall?" Kiko asked, her voice incredulous. "Made of scrap? Sir, with all due respect, my algorithms can't even process that as a theoretical defensive structure. It's statistically absurd. It has a 0.0001% chance of doing anything." Her tablet chimed mournfully again. "Error. Human nonsense detected. Recommendation. Initiate recreational activity. High probability of mental fatigue." "Algorithms," Tiber snorted, waving a dismissive hand. "Your fancy calculations don't understand the stubbornness of a human when his home's on the line. These regulators, they rely on their perfect weapons. They hit an energy shield, it goes pop. But when their fancy plasma hits a washing machine door, what then, eh? Or an old starship hull? Or a mountain of tires?" He slammed his fist on the table, making a few startled settlers jump. "Their perfect weapons ain't designed to deal with chaos. And we, my dear Kiko, are masters of chaos. We're gonna build 'em a wall of it." He unfolded a dusty, crumpled schematic, which looked suspiciously like it was drawn on a napkin with a crayon. "Here's the plan. It's a multi-layered, multi-material kinetic shield wall." He pointed with his pipe. "First layer on the outside is for deflection. Twisted girders, old solar panels, anything with a sharp angle. Make their shots ricochet. Second layer, absorption. Thick rubber, compressed fabrics, even old water tanks filled with sand, stuff that'll soak up impact. Third layer, pure brute force. Thick hull plating from crashed ships, old engine blocks, anything heavy and tough to stop what gets through the first two. Every piece of junk has a purpose. This ain't just trash, it's art. The regulators won't know what hit 'em. They're too logical for junk." The absurdity was still there, but a flicker of hope, however illogical, began to spread. No one had a better idea. The outpost leader, Mara, an old miner with eyes that had seen too many losing battles, looked at Tiber, then at Kiko's despairing simulations. She took a deep breath. "All right, Tiber, if this art is our last stand, then let's build it. Everyone, scavenge, bring every piece of metal, every bit of rubber, every old component you can find. We're building Tiber's wall." A buzz of renewed energy filled the dome. Despair gave way to a desperate, almost manic determination. They had less than 3 hours. The outpost transformed into a chaotic frenzy of activity. Buster, the silent scavenger, suddenly became the most popular man on Dust Devil. He moved with purpose, grabbing his heavy-duty all-terrain rover and heading out into the vast, dust-swept plains. He knew every crashed ship, every abandoned mining rig, every forgotten cargo container that had ever been buried by a sandstorm. He returned with the wildest assortment of treasures, twisted durasteel girders that groaned as he winched them onto his rover, massive segments of old shuttle hulls, the battered chassis of ancient mining vehicles, and even a stack of incredibly old, surprisingly intact tires from a pre-FTL Earth transport. He even dragged in a few ridiculously rusted bathtubs, which Tiber immediately eyed with a knowing nod. Excellent absorption properties. Buster's final, most baffling haul was a truly ancient, ornate, and impossibly large earring, shimmering faintly despite centuries of dust, which he had unearthed from what looked like a buried luxury transport wreck. He also brought back a strangely intact, though clearly broken, electric guitar, its strings snapped, but its body gleaming with faded paint. Taiba just grunted, interesting. Kiko, meanwhile, was experiencing a profound, existential crisis. Her advanced scanners, designed to identify complex alloys and intricate circuitry, simply beeped in confusion when pointed at Buster's Hall. ERROR, unclassified material. Lacking structural integrity data. Value, negligible. She felt ridiculous, strapping a broken satellite dish to a framework of old pipes. Her sleek comms gear felt out of place amidst the grime and sweat. Yet Taiba, constantly grumbling, would show her how to tell good salvage from bad by feel, how to test a weld by the sound it made, how to see the flow of stress through a bent piece of metal. "Your fancy screens can tell you what something is, Kiko," Taiba grumbled, wiping grease from his brow with a dirty rag. "But they can't tell you what it wants to be." As they worked, a small group of settlers, mostly grizzled miners who missed their old folk songs, started a slow, off-key rendition of an ancient Earth construction anthem, "Working on the Chain Gang," their voices rough but determined. It added a bizarre, almost festive air to the desperate scramble. From orbit, Commander Vex continued his observations, his patience wearing thin. His scout ships had reported on the continuous construction, and their detailed scans classified the wall as unanalyzable composite material, or, more bafflingly, unclassified structural anomaly. Vex zoomed in on the chaotic edifice. "What is this? Architectural chaos?" he clicked, his voice modulator emitting a low thrum of annoyance. "Are they attempting to construct a monument to their own demise? It appears to be composed entirely of discarded organics byproducts." "Commander, our data suggests the structure is highly irregular," Unit 77 reported, its drone voice as precise as ever. "Its density varies wildly. Its composition is incoherent. It defies standard classification protocols." "Precisely, Unit 77. It is illogical," Vex snapped. "But curiosity is a valid pursuit. Send probe, DELTA-9. Conduct a close-range material analysis. We shall classify this obstacle for future reference before its scheduled deconstruction. Grant them an additional half-cycle." It is rather amusing to observe such illogical effort. He believed his superiority was absolute, his advanced fleet unstoppable by anything other than another equally advanced fleet. The thought that a pile of human junk could ever challenge his perfectly designed weapons was an absurdity beyond his logical comprehension. He simply wasn't built to understand chaos, or the stubborn, illogical ingenuity that sprung from human desperation. The Dust Devil plains, usually silent save for the howl of the wind, now echoed with the clang of metal, the hiss of welders, and the shouts of determined humans. Under the unblinking gaze of the distant regulator fleet, Outpost Rust Bucket transformed into a bustling, grimy construction site. Every able body, young and old, was pressed into service. Small children, their faces smudged with dust and excitement, ferried lighter pieces of scrap, while the adults wrestled with heavy girders and twisted plates. The off-key rendition of "Working on the Chain Gang" wafted across the dusty air, a bizarre rhythmic counterpoint to the desperate welding. Old Man Taiba was the maestro of this chaotic symphony, his pipe still clenched in his teeth. He moved with surprising agility, directing every placement. "No, not there, you knucklehead," he'd bark, pointing with his wrench, which he affectionately called Sparky. "That's a plasma deflector section. It needs to be angled just so. We don't want their fancy energy bouncing back into our faces, do we? And don't you dare put that Nutri-Brew can down. A man's gotta have his proper brew if he's gonna build a proper wall." He meticulously chose each piece, like an artist selecting colors for a masterpiece. "This old refrigerator door," he'd explain, gesturing to a battered, rust-streaked appliance. "That's our first-line plasma absorber. The insulation inside, the warped metal, it'll just swallow their pretty energy blasts and spit out a puff of hot air. And this ancient space shuttle wing section, He'd point to a massive curved piece of alloy. "That's our primary kinetic round deflector. Those regulators fling rocks, we'll fling 'em right back, or at least send 'em spinning off into the desert. By my old boots' worn-out sole, this'll work." Kiko, meanwhile, was experiencing a profound shift in perspective. She'd initially tried to run simulations on Taiba's design, but her software just choked, spitting out error messages like "simulation aborted," "insufficient data for unstructured configuration," or "predictive models, wall performance negligible." The tablet, once a fount of precise data, now merely displayed error, unexpected cohesion, logic, insufficient data, human ingenuity, unquantifiable, in an increasingly frantic font. Yet as she watched the monstrous wall take shape, piece by painstakingly placed piece, a grudging respect began to form. She saw the logic in Taiba's madness, the layered density, the deliberately chaotic angles, the strategic placement of different material types. A sleek comms gear felt out of place amidst the grime and sweat. But she found herself manually calculating stress points, identifying potential weak spots, and even suggesting where Taiba could reinforce sections with thicker welds or strategically placed bracing struts, integrating her knowledge of structural engineering with his raw, intuitive genius. "Taiba," she admitted one afternoon, wiping sweat from her brow as she wrestled with a heavy hydraulic jack, "your unconventional methods actually have a bizarre kind of efficiency. My theoretical models are struggling to keep up. It's like chaos, but with a purpose." Taiba just grunted, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "That's 'cause theory ain't worth a lick in a sandstorm, Kiko. Experience, that's what matters. You gotta feel the metal, know what it wants to do." Buster, the silent workhorse, was invaluable. He seemed to have an endless supply of useful junk, returning from his scavenging runs with the most astonishing finds. One trip he dragged in what looked like an entire rusted pre-warp era train car chassis, which Taiba immediately designated as a, quote, "central backbone support." Another time he unearthed a vast pile of what appeared to be ancient, hardened rubber tires, which Taiba gleefully layered into the wall's absorption sections. "Perfect! These'll swallow kinetic energy like a hungry bantha," Taiba exclaimed, making a rare display of enthusiasm. That impossibly large ancient earring Buster had found. Taiba somehow managed to embed it near a section of old comms dishes, claiming it would vibrate at just the right frequency to annoy alien sensors. The broken electric guitar? It was wired into a section of resonance plates, just in case we need a little accompaniment for their explosions. From orbit, Commander Vex continued his observations, his patience wearing thin. His scout ships had reported on the continuous construction, and their detailed scans classified the wall as unanalyzable composite material, or, more bafflingly, unclassified structural anomaly. Vex zoomed in on the chaotic edifice. "What is this? Architectural chaos?" he clicked, his voice modulator emitting a low thrum of annoyance. "Are they attempting to construct a monument to their own demise? It appears to be composed entirely of discarded organics byproducts." "Commander, our data suggests the structure is highly irregular," Unit 77 reported, its drone voice as precise as ever. "Its density varies wildly. Its composition is incoherent. It defies standard classification protocols." "Precisely, Unit 77. It is illogical," Vex snapped. "But curiosity is a valid pursuit. Send probe DELTA-9. Conduct a close-range material analysis. We shall classify this obstacle for future reference before its scheduled deconstruction. Grant them an additional half-cycle." It is rather amusing to observe such illogical effort. Probe Delta 9, a sleek, gleaming orb of advanced sensors and molecular analyzers, zipped down to the surface, hovering gracefully towards the scrap metal shield wall. It emitted a series of rapid scanning beams, its internal processors whirring, trying to make sense of the visual cacophony. It neared a section where Old Man Taiba had carefully interwoven layers of old fishing nets, Buster's oddest find yet, with coils of discarded communication wire, all secured with thick, tar-like goop from salvaged fuel cells. The probe's sensors screamed, "Error, tangled refuse, impeding sensor functionality." It tried to pull back, but a loose strand of the ancient, sticky fishing net snagged one of its maneuvering thrusters. The probe whined, its elegant form now hopelessly entangled, dangling grotesquely from the wall like a trapped insect. Commander Vex's crystalline eyes widened on his monitor. "The probe is entangled in primitive refuse," he clicked, a rare note of genuine disbelief in his modulated voice. "Retrieve it. This is an insult to our sensors." A perfectly calibrated diagnostic unit, caught by debris. On his main screen, a large flashing message appeared. Error 404. Logic not found. Meanwhile, a regulator foot soldier, frustrated by the probe's entanglement, decided to take matters into its own hands. It marched up to the wall, snarled, or its alien equivalent, and punched a section made from a particularly stubborn piece of twisted rebar. A loud crunch echoed, and the soldier quickly recoiled, shaking its hand, a distinct dent now visible in its metallic fist. It stared at its hand, then at the unyielding wall, its internal processors visibly struggling. The regulators, true to their schedule, initiated their first, preliminary assault. Vex intended it as a punishment strike, a demonstration of overwhelming force to break the human's will. A wave of smaller regulator destroyers moved into position, their plasma cannons glowing with deadly intent. "Commence preliminary purification sequence," Vex ordered, his voice echoing across his bridge with confident authority. "Target: primitive obstruction. Deconstruct the anomaly." From behind the nascent scrap metal shield wall, the humans braced themselves. Kiko's terminal still showed extreme risk, but her eyes were fixed on the wall, a desperate hope flickering within her. Old Man Tiber stood with his wrench ready, a glint in his eye, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. The first volley of regulator plasma bolts streaked across the dusty plains, brilliant lances of white-hot energy aimed squarely at the wall. The ground trembled. The impact was deafening. Dust erupted, obscuring the view. Then, silence. As the dust began to settle, revealing the towering mismatched structure, a collective gasp rippled through the human defenders. The wall still stood. Where the plasma bolts had struck, the old refrigerator door was melted and warped. A few old tires had vaporized, and some of the panels were scorched black. But the wall itself, this ridiculous monument of junk, was intact. A few bolts had actually splattered against oddly angled sections of old satellite dishes, dissipating harmlessly, or had been absorbed into layers of compacted fabric. One blast hit an old, weather-beaten billboard that Buster had inexplicably included. The plasticized ad, depicting a smiling family enjoying a synth shake, warped and peeled, but remained surprisingly intact, the smiling faces now comically scorched, still staring defiantly at the alien fleet. Kinetic projectiles, previously so terrifying, had simply embedded themselves with a dull thunk into thick layers of rubber and compressed metal, their destructive energy absorbed and trapped. For a moment the humans were stunned, then a single disbelieving laugh broke the silence, then another, and then a roar of triumph erupted from the outpost. Cheers, shouts and ecstatic whoops filled the air. Old Man Tiber, a triumphant glint in his eye, simply nodded, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Told ya," he grunted, taking a leisurely puff from his pipe. On Commander Vex's bridge, confusion reigned. His tactical displays were a mess. "Commander! Primary energy bursts show 0 effective penetration." Unit 77 reported, its voice modulator emitting a stutter. "Kinetic impacts, absorbed or deflected. The obstruction remains intact." Vex slammed his fist on his console, a rare display of agitation. "Impossible. It is merely a lucky deflection. Recalibrate plasma emitters for tighter focus. Send another volley. Calibrate for maximal deconstruction of organic waste pile. This is an insult to our tactical algorithms." Another volley of plasma and kinetic rounds hammered the wall. Again the ground shook. Again, dust billowed. And again, when the dust cleared, the scrap metal shield wall stood, battered but unbroken, a defiant, absurd monument to human will. Commander Vex's anger escalated, his clicks becoming sharp and frantic. This was not according to protocol. This was not logical. This was an anomaly of the highest order. Commander Vex's anger pulsed across the Purity One's bridge, a cold, logical fury that made his crystalline form shimmer erratically. The primitive obstruction on Dust Devil had now absorbed 2 preliminary volleys, a statistical anomaly that defied all regulator doctrine. "This is unacceptable," he clicked, his voice modulator emitting sharp, agitated tones. "It is illogical for such an unrefined structure to withstand even a fraction of our purification protocols. Prepare for full planetary bombardment. Set a grid pattern. I want every square meter of that waste pile incinerated." His internal systems registered a logic core overload warning, but he ignored it. The entire regulator fleet, a menacing armada of obsidian black ships, shifted into attack formation. Their weapons bays, previously held in reserve, flared with ominous energy. This wasn't a warning. It was a final, overwhelming assault designed to erase Rust Bucket from existence. Streaks of superheated plasma, followed by the silent, terrifying trajectory of mass-accelerated kinetic projectiles, began to rain down from the sky. The very atmosphere of Dust Devil ignited, turning the dim, dusty sky into a maelstrom of alien fire. Behind the scrap metal shield wall, the human defenders braced themselves. The outpost's fragile habitats shuddered with each distant impact. Kiko's holographic terminal, usually a beacon of complex data, now simply showed a terrifying, pulsing red mass where the regulators were unleashing their fury. "Impact inbound!" "Massive energy spikes," she yelled, her voice barely audible over the escalating roar of the attack. The group of miners who had been singing had fallen silent, their faces pale. "Everyone, down! Stay close to the wall!" Old Man Tiber bellowed, his voice raw but unwavering. He stood near a vital junction of twisted girders and old train car chassis. His wrench, Sparky, gripped tight. Buster, his silent strength a rock, positioned himself to quickly patch any smaller debris that might fly over. Even Mara, the outpost leader, was now helping carry smaller salvage, her eyes fixed on the wall with desperate hope. The first full volley struck the wall with earth-shattering force. The very ground bucked beneath them. Sparks flew in blinding torrents as plasma bolts splattered against warped satellite dishes and old vehicle panels. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of metallic screeches, thunderous impacts, and the deep, resonating groan of stressed alloy. It was chaos, raw and terrifying, but it was their chaos, organized by Old Man Tiber's improbable vision. Commander Vex watched from PURITY-1's bridge, his crystalline eyes fixed on the target readouts. His primary tactical display, however, was flashing a bewildering array of errors. "Commander, plasma effectiveness, negligible, kinetic impacts, dissipated or deflected. Analysis, incomprehensible." Unit 77, the once unflappable tactical officer, was emitting distressed clicks. "Energy absorption, high. Trajectory deviation, extreme. Commander, several of our own kinetic projectiles are showing return trajectories. One has impacted Regulator Ship 47, Beta." Vex slammed his fist on his console, a rare display of agitation. "Impossible! Our precision-guided kinetic rounds cannot be deflected by mere refuse. Recalibrate all weapon systems. Target for maximum structural instability." He commanded his fleet to focus fire, concentrating their devastating power on single sections of the wall, trying to find a weak point. But Tiber had known. He had intuitively understood the illogic of their weapons. Where the regulators focused their plasma, the wall's thick insulated layers of old refrigerator doors and compacted fabrics simply swallowed the superheated energy, glowing dull red for a moment before cooling, the material warping but holding. Kinetic projectiles, flung at incredible speeds, would slam into a tangled web of rebar and old suspension coils, their momentum twisting into a futile spin, or hit a deliberately angled shuttle wing segment and ricochet wildly, sometimes back towards the attacking ships, much to the regulator's analytical confusion. One particularly powerful plasma blast meant to atomize an entire section, instead hit a large, spherical water tank embedded deep within the wall. The water inside instantly boiled and vaporized, creating a violent steam explosion that wasn't destructive to the wall, but instead forcefully dispersed the plasma, turning it into a harmless, glowing mist. The regulator's sensors registered this as target reactive deflection, hydrogen-based anomaly. Behind the wall, the humans, though terrified, were united. They peeked over the top, then quickly ducked back down as another volley slammed into the wall. "It's holding! It's actually holding!" Kiko yelled, a wild, disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. Her terminal, despite its errors, was now showing wall integrity anomalously high. Logic failed. Data still holding. She was feeding Tiber live data on where the wall was taking the most hits, allowing him to direct Buster and others to quickly patch and reinforce vulnerable sections with whatever scrap was nearby. Old car doors were quickly welded over new scorch marks. Old engine blocks were dragged into place as makeshift buttresses. Suddenly, a particularly large kinetic projectile, a heavy tungsten slug, slammed into a section of the wall where Buster had recently integrated a massive, ancient Earth-era concrete mixer. The mixer, rusted but incredibly dense, simply vibrated violently, absorbing the impact. Then, with a groan of tortured metal, it slowly, comically, began to rotate, its drum grinding. The kinetic slug, instead of piercing through, was now inside the mixer, rattling around. Commander Vex's monitor showed projectile status contained. Location: unclassifiable rotating organic waste device. Logic core overloaded. Vex actually clicked a series of rapid, high-pitched sounds, bordering on an emotional breakdown. His crystalline form flickered wildly, and a small, almost imperceptible pop could be heard from one of his optical sensors, followed by a faint wisp of smoke. "This is madness!" he shrieked, a raw, unmodulated sound escaping his voice modulator for the first time. "This is not logical warfare. They are using discarded construction equipment to defeat our advanced weaponry." The battle raged, a bizarre testament to contrasting philosophies. The regulators, perfectly logical, precise, and utterly inflexible in their tactics, threw everything they had. They expected the wall to break, to disintegrate, to follow predictable patterns of destruction. But the scrap metal shield wall was a monument to unpredictability. It bucked, it groaned, it shimmered with heat, but it did not break. Each impact, instead of reducing it, only served to highlight its absurd, magnificent resilience. Even the old, broken electric guitar, wired into a resonance plate, let out a surprisingly loud, distorted TWANGGG with one particularly heavy impact, adding a bizarre, musical flourish to the chaos. From a safe distance, a small, stealthy, celestial observation drone, Unit XYLOS-7 Beta, a covert scout deployed by Dr. XYLOS-7 from the Etherian, watched the unfolding spectacle. Its internal diagnostics were screaming, data corruption, logic paradox detected, threat assessment, recalibration, impossible to calculate. The drone, designed to quantify all phenomena, was witnessing the unquantifiable. Commander Vex's frustration reached its absolute peak. His tactical displays were a kaleidoscope of red errors. His ships were expending massive amounts of energy, and some were even taking friendly fire from their own deflected projectiles. The humans, meanwhile, were cheering, laughing, and even shouting taunts from behind their metal monstrosity. "Commander, our resource expenditure is becoming unsustainable. We have failed to achieve primary objective," Unit 77 reported, its drone voice now laced with genuine distress. "Continued engagement will lead to critical energy depletion. The obstruction remains at 87% structural integrity." Vex stared at the wall on his main screen. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't logical, it was just a pile of junk. But it was working. He had no tactical solution for something so utterly chaotic. His protocols, his training, his very being offered no response. This was not a defeat by superior force. It was a defeat by sheer, stubborn, illogical human stubbornness. "This is not a victory for them." Vex finally clicked, his voice modulator struggling to maintain its composure, emitting a series of short-circuiting pops. It is a failure of our data analysis. This primitive organic resistance defies all probability. Retreat. All units, retreat. Re-evaluate primitive organic resistance protocols. We are withdrawing to recalibrate our understanding of unstructured defense tactics. With a final, frustrated volley that harmlessly splattered against the scrap metal shield wall, the regulator fleet, once so formidable and precise, turned and began to withdraw. Their silent, orderly retreat was marred by the sight of several ships bearing scorch marks from their own deflected shots, or the faint outline of a ridiculously large rusted bathtub embedded in their hull plating. They left Dust Devil's sky defeated not by an army, but by a wall of human junk, and the sheer, infuriating illogic of humanity. A profound silence descended upon Outpost Rust Bucket. The deafening roar of the regulator attack had ceased, replaced by the eerie calm of a sky free from alien warships. Dust, disturbed by countless impacts, slowly began to settle, revealing the battered but unbroken silhouette of the scrap metal shield wall. For a long moment the human defenders, huddled behind their makeshift fortress, simply stared, disbelieving. Then, a single joyful whoop shattered the quiet. It began slowly, a ripple of quiet awe, turning into an unstoppable wave of euphoria. People emerged from behind the wall, their faces streaked with grime and tears, but alight with pure, unadulterated triumph. They touched the rusted metal, ran their hands over the dented panels, and laughed, a raw, joyous sound that echoed across the plains. This wasn't just a wall, it was a miracle, a monument built from nothing but their own grit and garbage. The old billboard, with its comically scorched synthshake ad, now seemed to wink at the victory. Old Man Tiber, leaning against a section of the wall made from an old starship's command console, simply puffed on his pipe, a knowing, almost smug smile playing on his lips. He watched the celebration, the pure, unbridled relief on the faces of his community. Kiko, her face beaming, practically vaulted over a pile of old tires to reach him. "Tiber! It worked! It actually worked! My simulations, they were wrong. Completely wrong." She hugged him fiercely, grease and dust be damned. Tiber patted her awkwardly on the back. "Told you, kid. Some things you can't put in a fancy simulation. You gotta feel it in your gut. And this wall's got more gut than a pack of hungry banthas. Now, about that Nutri-Brew, I think I earned a decent cup." Buster, the silent scavenger, simply nodded, a rare, wide grin splitting his usually stoic face. He surveyed the wall, his eyes twinkling, as if contemplating the next piece of treasure he could find to add to its legend. He even gave the concrete mixer a proud pat, listening to the soft clink of the regulator slugs still trapped inside. The entire outpost, from the oldest elder to the youngest child, felt a surge of unbreakable pride. They had taken the refuse of a hard life and forged it into their salvation. News of the scrap metal shield wall spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The regulator fleet's ignominious retreat from Outpost Rust Bucket became the subject of bewildered analyses and quiet amusement on countless star lanes. Commander Vex's official report to Central Command was a masterpiece of bureaucratic frustration. Objective failed. Resistance encountered was an, quote, unstructured composite barrier. Our advanced purification protocols proved inefficient against its illogical composition. Recommendation: re-evaluate all parameters for primitive organic resistance and develop countermeasures for waste material structures. The regulators, once universally feared for their cold precision, were now a cosmic punchline. They had been outsmarted by a pile of junk. On galactic news feeds, holographic images of Vex's flickering face and the message, "Error 404, logic not found," played on repeat, much to the amusement of other species. Other alien races, especially those who had felt the cold, logical might of the regulators, reacted with a mix of astonishment and respect. The Celestials, who had just recently been humbled by humanity's coffee can ingenuity, observed the reports with a renewed sense of analytical bewilderment. Ambassador Valerius himself initiated a new interspecies study, The humans continue to defy logical classification, he mused in a formal address to his council. Their primitive methods are proving remarkably effective against advanced threats. Dr. XYLOS7's theories on unquantifiable adaptability may require immediate reprioritization. We must now consider waste materials as potential tactical assets. Celestial research teams began deploying their own diagnostic probes to other human settlements, trying to understand the, quote, logic behind their chaotic efficiency. Unit XYLOS7 Beta, the drone that witnessed the battle, was brought in for extensive debriefing, its logic paradox detected, warning still stubbornly flashing. The Cathar, the proud warrior race, were deeply impressed. Their updated tactical manuals now dedicated entire chapters to improvised field fortifications and strategic use of refuse. They began incorporating strange, non-standard materials into their own armor and defensive structures, believing it would grant them a similar human luck. Some Cathar commanders even started carrying small, oddly shaped pieces of salvaged metal as good luck charms, a silent homage to the scrap metal shield wall. The Luminarians, the empathic beings, felt a deep resonance with humanity's spirit. They sensed the powerful communal bond and the sheer, unyielding will that had gone into building the wall. To them, it wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a manifestation of collective determination, a beacon of defiant hope. Their philosophy now included a new appreciation for the messy, illogical strength of collaborative effort. This rust bucket was no longer just a humble mining colony. It became known across the sector as the Wall of Dust Devil, a legendary site where human ingenuity had stared down a galactic superpower and won. Pilgrims from various species, curious to witness the impossible, would travel to Dust Devil, gaze upon the towering, chaotic masterpiece of scrap, and marvel at the spirit that had forged it. The wall, constantly being reinforced and expanded with new treasures, found by Buster and his growing team of scavengers, stood as a living testament to Old Man Tiber's philosophy. There's no such thing as junk, only parts in waiting. Humanity's reputation in the cosmos evolved once more. They were no longer just the adaptable, they were now the builders of miracles from trash. They proved that true strength wasn't measured in advanced weaponry or sleek starships, but in the boundless creativity of a mind unconstrained by convention, and the sheer, stubborn will to survive, even when armed with nothing but discarded dreams and a mountain of junk. The scrap metal shield wall was more than just a barrier of metal. It was an unbreakable symbol of human spirit, built piece by defiant piece, proving that when hope seemed lost, a little ingenuity and a lot of scrap could halt an invasion.